Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to Leading Dragons podcast platform. Now, while we wait for our special guest, Charisse Fontes, who will be coming all the way from San Francisco, I just want to do a little recap about Leading Dragons. What is Leading Dragons about? The Leading Dragon is the leader that steps into their power and leads with flow. As we know, and particularly what has been surfaced in the last 18 months with the pandemic and the lockdowns around the world, is we have seen a mass increase in burnout, in lots of changes happening inside organizations. At the same time, are they the right changes? Unfortunately, still today, there's still greed, power, and control that prevail a great majority of capitalist organizations. And we are shifting towards more for people rather than for profit organizations. But there's still a way to go. The leading dragon is often associated with water. And why is that? A lot of people ask me, why water? So to me, water signifies three things. We have water that is cleansing, it's healing, it's purifying. And we believe at Leading Dragons that there is still a choice that we can make around the baggage that we carry from past traumas. And it's up to us to choose whether we own that and whether we own to process that baggage. Because through that, we can heal, we can purify, and we can become better versions of ourselves. Water also symbolizes life, and life is energy. And we have Charisse, who's just arrived. So I'm going to say good morning, Charisse.
Grand rising to you. How are you?
Very well. I was in my little speech around water and leading dragons.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Nice.
Just before you arrived, and I'm delighted to have you.
Thank you.
I'm delighted to have you on the show, and it's such a pleasure to see you. It's been a little while since we last connected. How are you doing?
Oh man, I'm doing really well. You know, I like to think of, there's this saying, it's I can't pronounce it, it's in Korean, but it essentially is, have you eaten rice? And it is something that was said after the Korean War when their country went into poverty. And it was literally, have you eaten rice? Like, have you eaten today? And it became one of those phrases that, like, are you well? Like, are you nourished? And so I've eaten a lot of rice. A lot of things have happened since we last spoke.
Wow.
But I am, because how are you doing sometimes is more of an emotional question. And we tend to, I'm fine, I'm okay. But like, even if I'm not okay, have I eaten rice? Am I nourished, like at the soul being of myself? And I am. So thank you for asking.
Perhaps I could ask you the question, is your cup full?
Oh, it is overflowing. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, and I love that, and it's interesting that you say that, because we do say, how do you do?
Yeah.
And although I do ask it with purpose,
yeah.
Perhaps we could like rephrase it differently, and play on words a little bit more, and adventure on that. Yeah. So Charisse, welcome to Leading Dragons.
Thank you.
And Marie, thank you for accepting the invitation. Charisse, you're all the way from San Francisco, so it's early morning for you.
Yeah, it's about 7 o'clock, which isn't. I wake up pretty early. I usually wake up around 5 a.m. So this is still kind of in my window of peace, but it's the perfect time for me to talk to you. Like, this is awesome.
Lovely. That's lovely. And, and just before we dive in, and I'd love to hand the mic over to you. I was talking to the audience about water. So there's water that's associated to leading dragons, and why is that? And I was saying that the leading dragon stands in their power and leads with flow. And with flow, there's water. I see water. Water is grounding. I swim every morning in the lake that's 3 minutes drive from where I live. And it's cleansing, it's purifying. And I'm saying, so, what is it, how much do we choose on a daily basis to own what we have and what we're carrying in order to then process it and release it and purify and heal ourselves? And then I was talking about, there were two other elements that water symbolizes for leading dragons, which is life. Okay, so everything is energy, and energy is the ability to change. So then it was, well, how much of our ability to change and grow do we choose to embrace and deepen and apply that ability to change? And then third and last is that water also symbolizes movement. Can you imagine, Charisse, if all of us could go through life like water goes between the rocks and the mountains? We would be choosing joy over pain and resistance. I'm just diving deep right away, aren't I?
We didn't show up into this existence to play small. So, and when you're talking about water, it's so interesting. So my son was 12 at the time, and I was driving with him, and I said, little human, I was like, son, tell me your best wisdom. I was like, give me the best wisdom you got. You've been on this planet for 12 years. Tell me what you got. And he said, be water, which comes from something that Bruce Lee would say. And I said, tell me more. And he said, if you're like water, you can fit in different things. You can fit into a cup. You can fit into a small glass. You can go around rocks. You can, if your attitude, just like what you said, if your attitude is like water, you can really be anywhere and do anything essentially. And so he's 17 now. So I've always remembered that little bits of wisdom of like be water, especially when it comes to my attitude towards something.
I love that.
So yeah, I mean, and then when you think about it from a birthing perspective, the most important thing that we have in terms of birthing that we all share. So every human that is listening right now, we all share this. We were all formed within water, that amniotic sac. We were all formed in water, and it allowed us to grow and develop in different ways. And, the water, we talk about it in birthing, is one of the most important components of birth. And so water, I love this.
But there's also, water is movement. So we are nothing without movement, and it's motion, and it's through motion and movement that we are able to grow. We're able to expand. We're able to experience. We're able to live, and we're also able to flow and allow. And I think, and it goes back to a bit what Charisse, what you're saying about the birthing piece, is like through water we allow, because we're going in between. So we're going in between the adversity, the challenges, and this sort of links to the fear piece. But before we go any further, Charisse, please, just straight over to you. Tell us a little more about you.
Well, I like people to know that I am human. I'm human, y'all, like just like you. And essentially the things that I do are associated with two things: solving what breaks my heart and doing what makes my heart sing. And so through that, I've created a consulting company that goes into growing companies and help them with partners with them on their culture and inclusion. So creating workspaces with more humanity and just building the culture and the foundation for the center, the core of the company is the culture. Like you think of your core as in, when you do sit-ups or any kind of movement, your core is so center. The culture is the core. So we go into that core and we really help amplify that. And then why that's important is we spend 1/3 of our lives doing what's called work. And it's such an inaugural part of how we flow into the world, how we move into the world. And if the workplace isn't healthy, we take that with us into our home spaces. We take that out into our communities. And, those types of things really do hurt the progress and the things that we wish to see more of in the world. And then I run a nonprofit called Humanity Power. And essentially what Humanity Power is, it started off as a statement that there is unity in our humanity and we can end these isms. So ageism, ableism, classism, colorism, sexism, racism. We can end these isms that are harming our humanity through the unity that is within our humanity. We have it all within us. We don't need to go on this expedition to figure it out. We have it inside. It's an inside job. And so I use high vibrational education. So instead of education that doesn't transcend, I use education that transcends. So starting at a basis, but not leaving us there. Building community. So I've been building the community that I've been in for the last 3.5 years, feeding the community, putting events together, just really knowing the people. Not everybody's a friend, but like I remember probably like 6 months ago, a neighbor that I had done an event with, we knew each other, knew her kids, had texted me and said, "Hey, we're moving. We don't really have much. Can I borrow some sugar?" And I thought it was like only on TV that happened. You have no idea. I screenshotted it. I own that moment. I was like, someone just asked me to borrow sugar. I've never experienced that. And I mean, I think I probably when I was like 4-year-old Charisse, but throughout my life, I had never really known that was possible. And in a community that's high tech, you could Uber anything, So it was just a very, it was confirmation that, really being and building community is key. And then lastly, it's really showing people through action what it means to use that humanity, what it means to build community, what it, just kind of taking us out of what we've been told or sort of the system that we've adopted, that there's another way. There's another way to do this. If you're exhausted, if you're burnt out from seeking justice, from going into spaces and trying to solve situations, there's actually another way. To your point of the flow of the water, there's a way to be water with this. Martin Luther King Jr. did it really well. Nelson Mandela did it really well. Mother Teresa did it really well. Being water in a place in where there was a lot of fire going on, not to become that. And so Humanity Power does that. And then I'm also a birth doula. So I help families birth their babies. It's such a rewarding thing. I use a lot of birth analogy. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm a mom of 5. I live in the Bay Area, California, and I just, I'm just doing what I'm here to do.
And you are a ray of light. And just listening to you when you were talking about the sugar piece, I remember, and it's so much about, sorry, I'm jumping here, but it's so much about also showing what is that we can actually ask for sugar from the next door neighbor. And then when you show your neighbor, so actually for me, I thought this evening, right, okay, I'm going to make a carrot soup. And I checked all the ingredients that I had, all the different spices and all that, and that was great. But I didn't have any carrots, and it was Sunday evening, and I'm like, oh no. So I asked my neighbor, and she was a bit surprised. But that kind of opened the door to a different relationship and a closer, more communal relationship. And then so a few days later, she asked me for some eggs. And so it's also allowing, isn't it? And it's allowing that humanity, that humanness into relationships with people that we typically only say hello and goodbye to.
Yeah. Yeah. You bring up something very key, because we don't necessarily always see the other person as human. We've found a couple of block parties and events here, and some people like, I've been living here for 20 years. I don't even know. And I'm like, that boggles my mind. How can you be in a space for 20 years and not know or want to know the person next to you? I mean, I know that there's some neighbors. One, she's like, I just suffer from anxiety, and and she's learned, but she's still craving that community. So whether it's me, but I mean, she and I talk very much, but like going to large events, is not really her thing. So, I understand that there is some anxiety around meeting new people, but to be in somewhere for 20 years and not really immerse yourself is interesting. And then also you talked about allowing. And I've been working with a spiritual teacher for the last 6-7 years. And she was saying to me, she's like, Charisse, you're very analytical. And I get it honest. My mom is a data person, very analytical. I mean, I can analyze. Give me anything, I'll analyze it.
Till the cows come in.
And so she's like, you analyze everything. And I'm like, yeah, it kind of bothers me. It's kind of exhausting. Someone says something nice to you. Why did they say that? What did I do to deserve them that they said that? Like, what do I say back? How do I say it? Just that kind of thing. And she says, and I said, okay, so what do I do? She's like, you got to turn down your analytical, like 20%, got to put it at 20%. I'm like, okay, great. That sounds awesome. What do I fill the next 80% with? And she says, she thinks for a second. And she says, allowing. And I take that in for a second, and I'm like, She's like, receiving. And I said, And what she said was, so when someone says something nice to you, instead of you saying, oh, thank you, I totally blah, 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 kind of let me distract you from this nice thing you said to me. Thank you, I receive it. I receive it and thank you. And what's so fascinating is that in the same way you can receive and allow, the same way you cannot. So if something doesn't agree with your soul, your spirit, your energy, you don't have to receive it. You light and love and thank you.
Yes, and then you walk away.
And then you walk.
But we're talking about, and it's lovely that share, and I really loved what you've been sharing, Charisse. And I like how you talked about earlier about amplifying the core in cultures inside organizations.
Yeah.
That you build communities, and that you nourish people. You nourish humans and your humanness, and you're human. You nourish your humanness first and foremost. And both you and I are really passionate about organizational culture and organizational leadership. And just before you came on, I was talking about how with organizations still today, there's so much profit over people that still prevails. Greed, power, and control. And in the past 18 months, with the pandemic and the lockdowns, a lot of people it's come to a head. And now there has been and there still is a lot of chaos that's happening. and systems and processes that are becoming or have become obsolete and perhaps even collapsing. And as leading dragons, because I fundamentally believe that you are part of also the leading dragons movement, which is we are here to beam our lights and to step aside of the chaos and start building the new paradigm, new systems, and support that transition between the old and the new. What is your take on that?
Well, I have a couple thoughts on this. Is when I think about the system, the word system, and we think of systemic, and that word systemic derives from the word system, and the system doesn't work unless the programming does, and we are the programmed. So I think about it in those phases, those three phases: the system, the programming, the programmed. We are the programmed. And what does that mean? It means that we have gone into agreement with a certain idea or paradigm. And just for people that are curious around paradigms, paradigms are most of the time ways of thinking that trap us. And so we've gone into agreement with this programming that we must work harder, which by words, work and hard are both relative. What's work to you is not work to me, and what's hard to you is not hard to me. So that essentially we've kind of set ourselves up there. And so in order for the system to be adjusted, the programming has to be rewritten. The humanity has to be amplified. And when I talk a little bit about the history of business and how I talk about it from the standpoint of the Industrial Revolution and how business really started to emerge and start there. However, there was a part of business that didn't. There was a part of business, and going back to community, that was like, oh, I grow carrots. You love eating carrots? Awesome. I'm going to grow carrots. And then, oh, I love eating carrots and I make really good banana bread. Well, I'm going to give you banana bread for carrots. And it just became this, we created jobs out of need and purpose, not out of want.
Greed.
Or greed. Yeah. I mean, or just out of, I'm going to do this because fill in the blank, versus I'm going to do this because there's a need in our community. There's a need in the world. I'm going to grow this. You think about a garden, and nature. Nature grows nothing without purpose. So why should we do anything different? And so, but business has kind of convoluted that a little bit. And the interesting part about creating a system that is human-centered, it doesn't negate the fact that the business can make money. In fact, money is energy. And if you look at it in that component, what businesses are usually built upon are some type of form of lack or fear, which is not allowing them to step into, oh, we have a place where there are humans with untapped abilities. Let's lean in on that. The business will take care of itself because the business is linear. The humans are lunar. We are the variable. So you count for the variable always. And so if business is going to stay the same, if it's like, okay, money in, money out, like this is how we, account for the human, because that is the core to your company, your culture. And if you can account in a humanized way, you then begin to change the economics of business. And it reminds me, have you ever watched Monsters Inc., the Monsters Inc. movie? Okay.
No.
So there's a movie called Monsters Inc., and it basically is a movie of these monsters. It's a kids movie, and it's about these monsters that in their world. So there's the monster world and then the human world. And the monsters, to get energy, like electricity, whatever, their jobs is to go into the human world and scare little kids. And the screams are what they capture as energy. Well, I'm going to spoil the movie for you because there's a point to this. They find out through through an interaction with a human, a little human, that wait a minute, I don't think we're doing this the right way. Like, they're not what we were told. Yeah. And all of a sudden, like, they go through this whole adventure. Come to find out that laughter was 20 times, 30 times more powerful than the screams. And so I say that to say businesses have been using this old methodology, this traditional way of doing things, profit over people. Or if we say people over profit, we really will sacrifice any human that gets in the way. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Like, what if y'all exchange the screams, the fear, the kind of low vibe for the laughter? What happens if you create an environment where oxytocin and serotonin and space and grace and things are given?
How would that be? Can you imagine if we had organizations with an energy management department?
I'm laughing because I think that's where it's going to go. We as humans, I have magazines from the 1960s.
Oh, wow.
I have Time magazines. I think they're Time magazines from 1960s. I cannot tell you how sexist some of these magazine ads are. It's like, you want to treat your man right, make him some rice. And you have like this woman. And they had this one ad where it was the daughter and the mom in the kitchen and like the son and the dad at the table, like waiting for the mom to do it. And I'm like, okay, so think about that for a second. Would that fly now?
Hell no.
Absolutely not. And so when we talk about energy and people are like, oh, that's woo-woo, that's new age, which I don't understand the word new age too much because it's been around for centuries. Okay, let's break it down to Einstein, E=mc². Let's break it down to Newton's law of physics. Like, energy exists. And we cannot negate the fact that we can feel each other's energy 10 feet away from each other. We can peep the scene. We know, we have an intuitive knowingness for a reason. We have the second gut for a reason. We are energetic beings in physical form. We cannot escape that. So what's happening is we are going through between a haircut phase, not only in our society, but in the workplace, where we are now transcending to a bit of higher consciousness. And the workplace, if it is to create systems of humanity and inclusion and that capture the diverse set of our humanity, are going to need to evolve to that. So as I'm laughing out of like, yes, we will probably get there in another 10 years, if not sooner. Where it's like, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, wouldn't that be just wonderful?
It would.
And if everything would be like, because just like you're saying, and it is ultimately, right? It's energetic transactions, whether we like it or not.
Whether we like it or not.
But obviously we can't talk about that inside corporate cultures, because they'll be like, energetic transactions, what are you talking about? Here's a task list, do what you got to do. And then when you're done, you can go home, and you come the next day and do the same thing. And the meeting's the same thing. And the end of year results, the same thing. And it's just like, well, actually, no, because if we took that lens of, oh, well, actually, hang on a minute, performance, collective, individual performance is actually a pure reflection of our energetic transactions working together inside an organization, then perhaps we'll be cracking the code and going, wow, okay, so hang on a minute. What would need to change in order to improve the energetic transactions between us? And this goes back to culture.
You know, everything that I love everything you just said. Everything that we are seeking, searching for, sought after, are all things that cannot be tasted, touched, or smelled.
Mm.
Happiness, love, safety, peace, joy. We say money, but money is security, right? It's a feeling. It's a, am I safe or am I not safe?
Mm.
Right? Like, and that those are spaces that you can't actually touch, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But we have been seeking those things, and it's so fascinating that, yes, it might sound, you know, woo woo or too spiritual or whatever, but if we were to account for the fact that the energy, you know, when companies call me and they're like, we want to make sure the culture and the environment, they're essentially saying, you know, as well, they're essentially saying, we want the energy to be in such a way that it increases these tactical or these measurable effects within our company, where we can see these results. And what's interesting too is you don't get those results by going tactical. Yes, we have plans and a process for some of what we do. Well, for a lot of what we do, but some of it in the background is we're assessing, oh, we understand, even on Zooms, even in virtual, we've been able to get executives to break down and open up. We've been able to get to the core of what is being felt. We've been able to, like, because the energy is exchanged, the water is exchanged. Like, the water is a universal thing. I was talking to somebody the other day, and she was showing me her garden. And it was in a town that was an old mining town, and the mining had disrupted the earth. And she says, for the last 30 years, I've been cultivating the topsoil. And I was like, interesting. And this is like, I hadn't thought about topsoil in a long time. And I told her, I said, you know, I read a quote somewhere that our existence is predicated on 6 inches of topsoil and the fact that it rains. And then going back to your analogy of water, and when I think about the culture, and when I think of companies and how they're growing and how they want to grow and how they want to do, you know, they want to show up magnificent in the world, they don't realize that their people are the topsoil. That culture is the topsoil.
Mm-hmm.
The water is what brings in the life. And if we were thinking in ecosystem, the bees is that the values and the purpose. It's what pollinates everything to help it grow. And if you were to ask most people, and you said, what is our most precious natural resource? They'd most likely say water, oil, and gas. But it's topsoil, bees, and water. It's what, you know, and I think companies just need to shift the mindset a bit. Not to say natural gas and oil aren't important, but we could essentially live pretty decent lives if they didn't exist. We can't if we didn't have topsoil, bees, and water.
We know so most of us, it's part of our DNA, and no one is going to disagree, Charisse, about what you said in such a beautiful and most articulate way. But it's when we're in the environment at work, with the people, with the dynamics, with the organizational culture that there is. We know what's right to do, but we don't do it. And I'm just saying we because the majority of people who are passively disengaged has cost hundreds of billions of dollars across the world, and now it's moving from the company to people who are off sick, absenteeism, and the rest. So, and this brings us to ultimately to fear. So you were talking earlier about low vibrational space, when we are operating from that space of fear, which is all around, whether it's anxiety, stress, worry, fear of rejection, anger, rage, worry, all this. Well, we're contracted, and so even though we know what needs to be done, and even if we really would love to have it to do it and to make the changes, we can't, because energetically we're contracted, whereas because we're still stuck in that fear space. And it's how can we accompany people to truly to work through that fear. We're not machines. No, we are going to experience fear, yes, especially when we step out of our comfort zone and try something different. But first and foremost, how do we what is it that you do when you serve organizations to enable people to work with that fear and not allow it to stifle what they're looking to achieve or break through, but actually work and dance around it?
I love how you touched on fear. It's actually come up a couple times in conversations, and it's so relevant in business. A lot of it, I believe that the energy that is created, the business in the beginning, is the energy that will be throughout. So if there's a fear-based energy with the creation of something, it's going to stay within unless there is a shift or break in that energy or that mass. Or so for me and for Culture Circle, one of the things that we do is we look at things from an anthropological side. That's the beauty of some of what we do. So essentially, let's say we're going onto an island and there's a lot of fear within that island. We don't go onto an island and say, oh, what you're afraid of is not happening. It doesn't make sense. Like, don't be afraid. We are, not only are we outsiders, but we are clearly negating and dishonoring the experience, the human experience that has happened thus far. So what we do, and similar to exactly what we do with companies, is we sit and watch and we acknowledge and we hear and we create space and we listen. And to your point of disengagement, what I found was those are big words back in, like, I'm going to say 2015, 2019, just with, engage employees, engage. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, stop it. And I took it literal. I'm like, okay, engagement is engagement. Like, I wouldn't have said yes had I not been appreciated. And there's so much around that. I won't let me go back to this whole fear-based thing, but there's a nugget there. Whereas we go in and we don't go into agreement with the fear. So we don't go into agreement with whatever is happening we don't have to. We just need to acknowledge and be present and observe. Anthropologists, they don't go into tribes and try and change the way that they make food or live, or they sit and observe.
And allow. It goes back to the allowing piece that you were saying, 80%.
And in that, because every human has this in them, within that, when you tap into that, when you say, Sisi Nasawas, it's Swahili for we are the same, and I see you, something happens within our humanness where we're like, oh, I am safe because I am seen. And so we go in and we do this with companies in very a mix of philosophical, tactical, and strategic ways. And we identify whether it's fear. Let's say it's fear. We identify where the fear is. Most of it is because the amygdala is in hyperdrive. Why? Because they're in back-to-back meetings. They don't eat well. They don't sleep well. And by they, it's most of the leaders. You are, excuse me.
Let me get some water.
I'm asking you to drive me to a destination and you've had no sleep, you can barely see, and you actually don't know where you're going. I'm actually going to stay out of that car. Most companies are in that way. Like most, when they sign me up for this company, their leaders have very little rest, very little restorative recovery, little space to actually, am I doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing? Or am I just pushing harder? Right? And so the amygdala is heightened. That amygdala creates fear, freeze, or flight. That is then passed on through different bits of the organization. And it's like to the point where some people are afraid to talk and speak up. So when we come in as a neutral. We neutralize that. Because unless we give their people a reason to fear us, which we don't and have not, they tell us everything we need to know. And in that knowingness, we're able to tie, oh, okay, that makes sense why your productivity is low. Oh, that makes sense why you're having a 56% attrition rate. Oh, that makes sense as why your customer service is failing. And then it's like, okay, well, if those things are important to the business, we can help you recover those things. Why? Because it's all humanity at the end. And what we have seen is there is redemption in humanity. There's very little redemption in business. There's very little redemption in business.
That's beautiful, and I love how. So you are a fear neutralizer.
I am a healer. I am a healer. By my husband calls me a healer. I am in birth, in conversation with humans. I've realized I am a healer. I just, because I see. And I don't allow the ego to come in and say, oh, are you good enough? I'm here. 1 in 4 trillion chance. I must be good. There is no coincidences. So I must have something that's important.
And Charisse, so we're talking about fear, and you're talking, I love it how you say about neutralizing fear. I talk about often fear and contextualizing fear. And how, going back to the energy management department, that would actually be contextualizing and neutralizing fear. So every time you got a fear, there'd be an alarm that go off and people would be sent to the energy management. I mean, anyway. But going back to you, Charisse, because we're talking about fear, is there perhaps a story, no doubt there is, and more than one, that you would like to share before we, as a last piece to this beautiful podcast? Because I'm aware, I'm conscious of time as well. But what is there a story that you would like to share where you were faced with fear and you found a way through it?
Before I answer that, is there a story that I've told you that we've talked about? Just rekindle my memory. Is there something I've shared with you already?
There is, but we had, I mean, with you, I don't know where time goes. So we talk about so many things and everything, and then it just goes like water. Okay. So
do you have one in mind that I should say, or do you want me to just, okay. In the sense of the workplace, I think the best story for me around fear was leaving my 6-figure VP, thought I made it, job, that was, I mean, I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. I've been doing this work for a long time. This is where I'm supposed to be. And I'm going to represent for all the humans. And I'm going to do so much good with this title, so much good with this abundance that I've received. And it was not a good, I mean, I did some good. I was able to bring some light into the darkness, but it wasn't at the disadvantage of myself and my energy. It was really bad. I ended up having to recover a lot from it, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And so the fear around leaving that job, because my husband is a stay-at-home dad, we live in the Bay Area, we're a single income household, we have 5 kids, and the list, all of this stuff. And so I remember Googling, leaving your job, like, how, all this stuff. And it's like, have 3 to 6 months of savings, have another job lined up. I was too broken to even interview for another company. I did not have, I told my husband, I was like, we probably have a month and a half left. And it was scary. I mean, I didn't want to do it. I had fear of what was going to happen. And then eventually that fear started to turn into, well, it's either me or them, in the sense of, I'm either going to lose a lot of myself and it's going to take a while, or they're just going to take. And so driving or getting to the place, I was nervous and I kept, breathing and like, okay, I can do this. But there was, again, that was my internal, but then there was all these unanswered questions. How is this going to work? And then the fear of, I've been homeless before. Are we going to have to go back to the shelter? Like, am I going to lose? Am I, all of these things came in. Fear and ego. We're just having a field day. And I eventually resigned. I sat in front of the CEO. I resigned and spoke my truth and lived my faith. And I did a video afterwards because I didn't know if I was ever going to show it, but I was like, I did it. And I know something good is going to happen. And I just had faith. And it was in that moment where my faith outrode my fear. And that's when I know I'm in the best possible place. And so I decided, I switched. It was like I was fearful for a moment, but then I chose faith. And faith led me here to you today. And it led me to meeting this amazing woman the other day and acknowledging that in the sense of time and space, it took me 35 years to meet you. It took me 35 years to meet you. But for a time such as this, we are talking about something that is so transformative and so beautiful. And so, yes, I have had fear in so many different areas of my life, but I've always noticed when I switch my fear and replace it with faith, amazing things happened. And I couldn't have imagined Culture Circle growing into where it is, creating a nonprofit, doing these all out of really not even silencing, but just switching the ratio a bit, where the fear was a notch lower than my faith. Doesn't mean it dissipates, because when companies are going through this and they might have, or any human going through anything like that, change is messy at first. No, change is hardest at first, messy in the middle, and gorgeous at the end. And so when we think about fear, it's not about just facing that fear. It's like replacing it with something that is bigger than that. And that's usually faith or some type of grounding that allows you to just have a knowingness that there is more and better out there. We are not daily aware. We should not be living in daily awareness like the animals do. They live a lot of fear-based. They are like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? Like, I have to account for that. That's not us. That's not us. And that is the difference. One of the differences between us and them. And so the fear around leaving my job, was really big, but I did it.
Yeah.
And it was amazing because, again, there was a lot of things that didn't make sense, but I was able to do it. And so that is one story that comes to mind from the workplace.
No, I love that story. I love that share, Charisse. No, I hadn't heard it before. And I mean, actually, when you were telling the story, I was getting goosebumps. Because it's those defining moments where you're like, actually you get probably to a point where you don't even have a choice anymore. It's like there is no choice. It's not like, oh, should I stay or should I leave? It's like, no, I'm going to have to leave anyway. The choice is already made. The choice is made. What is it? Somebody said to me quite a while back. It's like we make decisions emotionally from the heart, and we justify them cognitively. And that's so true. It's like even as something as silly as buying a car. If you've fallen in love with a car, the car that's the whatever, whatever kind of car you want, then you're going to have to go, yeah, well, okay, so the reason that I need to buy it is, okay, let me make the list so that it makes sense and there's rationale going on, and I'm not just going, oh, I'll just throw my money at this car, whatever. It's just an example, but. And it's true, and it's so beautiful. And if only we could, and I don't know. I mean, if we could just flip a switch, and just have that, fear, faith, fear, courage, fear, faith. How does that? And I guess it's such a personal thing. Me personally, I've been through my own story and choosing courage over fear, because ultimately. You don't have a choice. There's no choice anymore. It's not a choice. It's actually, we're going this way. Now, how we're going to get there and what the outcome is going to be, that's a separate thing. Would you agree?
I think the word choice is very important until you get to a point where you don't need the word choice. That's, starting somewhere. But I'm following what you're saying. But if we were switching, if we were able to switch, we would miss the journey.
Exactly.
We would miss that. And it is a choice until you no longer need choice. And I think that's where you really go into transcendence.
Yeah.
Mother Teresa, it was not a choice in the beginning. It was, I mean, she came from a wealthy family. She had to choose to go and just carry, everything she owned in a sack. And eventually it no longer became a choice. It was, it is no brainer. It's when, and that is when, and that's actually a really deep concept of when it switches over, when you just know, I'm running into that burning building. Like, it is not a choice anymore. I've already, there was like this little kid that saved his sister from a dog attack. He just knew. There was no, should I? Well, she's kind of. No, there was no choice. He went in. And that's something that courage, but courage takes developing, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's through the pause moments between the switches that go on and off, that resiliency is built. And it no longer, I remember when I was in labor, I didn't have at that point, I didn't have a choice. The baby's coming. I'm gonna, all right. What's my mindset here? Am I like, there's no choice here. I had the choice. I had the choice 9 months ago. I had the choice 10 months ago, right? That was that, now there is no choice. Everything that has been leading up is to now.
Yeah.
And I think that as companies and humans, we all have those moments, and it's really fascinating when they come and they go. Oh, I had an opportunity to say something. Or it was no longer a choice. It was there. It was there in front of you. And everything that all the choices you've made are conditioning you for a time such as this. Okay,
Yeah.
I know we're at time, but I have one more
Go,
story.
go.
Okay.
I just love it because it's true. It's inner knowing. And we're all connected to that ultimately, but we've forgotten. And when we are typically in organizations, we're so disconnected from our inner knowing. And it's all these distractions. I actually call them weapons of mass distraction.
Yeah.
Which keeps us far away from our inner knowing and our soul center.
So,
but go ahead, tell our story.
The last story. This is not my story. This is a story that anyone can find. It's actually, and I'll paraphrase it, but it's I think the Bible is a fascinating book. And I have read it end to end. And there was a story of Esther in the Bible. And Esther was a Jew. And at that time, there was a rift going on between the Jews, and I forget the other people. But essentially, Esther didn't tell anyone that she was a Jew and became one of the king's favorites. And I mean, he just loved her and all of this stuff. And then there was a guy, I can't remember if it's her cousin. I'm not doing the story 100% justice, but I am doing for this purpose, and you should definitely go check it out yourself. But essentially, I forget the guy's name, but he had upset the king's like right-hand person. And he was like, I'm so pissed off. I'm going to kill all the Jews. Like that was his, like, I'm going to kill all the Jews. And the guy was like, Esther's friend or relative. He's like, Esther, like, you got to speak up. You got to say something. Like, you've been in this space of, nobody knows that you're a Jew, but the king is obviously favors you and loves you. Like, you got to say something so you can save us. You've been in this position for a time such as this. Like, you got to say something. And at that time, if you went to go see the king without being announced or called for, you could be killed, all this stuff. But Esther went in and she revealed herself. And because the king loves her so much, he spared all the Jews and they weren't killed. And what's so fascinating about that story is for a time such as this, she had a choice to keep it secret all of that time, right? Every single day she kept it secret. But there came a point where she could no longer choose.
Yeah.
Right? It was, I cannot allow my people to get slaughtered because I am living in fear or I'm living in whatever. And every human, and because business is where humans go to gather, has those choices on all of these different facets and levels. It's just the amygdala and ego will not allow you to see those opportunities in those expansive areas. And so we must slow down a bit. We must eliminate these distractions, remove the notifications, remove the need to be connected to the disconnected. You know, there are so many things that are out there that are calling and teaching us. Why we feel better in nature is because it's better to be in nature. Like, there are so many things. But that story of choice, and you just like inspired, like, I'm like, whoa, there's like so much here. Like, and so, but honoring our time and also honoring the fact that you have me here and just, we're having this beautiful conversation, all ties into what you have there on the screen is creating human-centric system from heart and spirit, because essentially those are the two things that are felt when we are gone from our physical bodies.
Wow, what a beautiful wrap up. Charisse, I can't thank you more, but I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And I'm thinking, okay, so this word choice is kind of like left hanging. And we're going to have to do another vidcast.
I think so.
Soon rather than later.
Yeah.
And perhaps start with the word choice, because ultimately that's each one of us have a sovereign choice. So I'll leave it with that.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your stories, your shares, your insights, and your time, and your love, and your care, and your generosity. I wish you a great day ahead. Mine's kind of finishing up, and I'm going to go and play tennis with my son.
Oh, lovely. Thank you for having me.
Until next time, take care.
Bye.
Bye.